Water detonated into froth as the 10-foot reptile surged, jawline yawning like a trap sprung by the swamp itself. The injured bobcat braced on sand that slid under her pads, pain sparking through ruined tendons. A bow wave should have ended her. Instead, a second shape scissored from the palmettos, larger, faster, rage contained in muscle and scar. He landed on the alligator's skull, claws arcing for soft ridges above ancient eyes. The swamp convulsed. Spray, grit, bellow, predator, protector, and prey fused into a single breathless instant. On the bank, human hearts stalled, hands rigid over tools too small to tilt fate. Teeth clacked shut on air, sand burst into shrapnel, and the water remembered every storm it had swallowed. What followed would be retold as a myth of bone and river, that the wild, when cornered together, sometimes rearranges its own ending. Hours before the clash, heat pressed low, making the cypress breathe damp secrets. The rescue team ghosted along the slough, reading the ground like scripture. Split tracks, tufted fur, a dragged hindstep that stuttered near Buttonbush. The cat they called Willow moved with a beauty diluted by pain, her coat bright as dry grass under sun, her paw ballooned with infection. The plan hovered between waiting and intervening, a mercy calibrated by law and risk. Humane traps were measured, venison cut to coins, scent lures dabbed into wind that forgot to blow. Cameras blinked red at dawn, green at dusk, then slept. In the marsh's hush, the old gator drifted like a rumor, carrying a history of propellers and baited shorelines. Everyone knew time was a predator too, warm-blooded, tireless, and always closing. They would need her to bed down. They would need luck to look their way.
Backstory is a current that tugs ankles long before footsteps reach water. Years earlier, bottles had glittered where fires hissed, and a jagged lip bit the pad of a hunting cat. No audience, no scream, only the quiet arithmetic of damage. Torn tissue, dirt hurled inward, infection knitting its dark web. Willow learned to carry her weight like a miscount. In a swamp, a limp translates across species. Herons notice, raccoons notice, reptiles notice most. Each missed rabbit shaved muscle. Each failed pounce invited hunger to share her den. Predators don't bargain with pity. They slot moments into instincts older than trees. Yet the swamp keeps ledgers in unexpected ink. Somewhere in the palmettos, a male ranged near her scent marks longer than custom, shadowing routes and pausing where she paused. Solitary is a rule. Rules bend when storms hang on the horizon and blood smells like iron. On the fourth morning, mist peeled back like gauze, and the bank showed its pale belly. A sandy shelf cut by roots splayed like fingers. Willow stepped out of the green with the composure of a creature that refuses humiliation, muscles rolling under a coat stippled by sunlight. She licked the swollen pad with small, precise insistence, teeth worrying at grit lodged like splinters of moon. Around her, the ordinary continued with a cruel serenity. Ibis stitching mud, a turtle's brief periscope, dragonflies writing electric cursive above still water. The rescuers held their breath without meaning to, swaddled in ferns and quiet orders. The bow wave announced itself the way danger often does, soft first, certain second. A triangular head rose, armored ridges shining like pebbles with memory. The gator angled toward the shelf, choosing land enough to close distance, water enough to own the retreat.
The alligator wore a history carved across his snout, a scalloped white scar, a human signature in a language of pain. Locals had named him Old Scar because people name what frightens them to pretend at familiarity. He had learned the wrong lesson near campsites. Where there are people, there are scraps. Where there are scraps, there is ease. Fear leaked away, replaced by a geometry of approach measured in inches. The rescuer's tranquilizer held a dose meant for 30 pounds of muscle and spring, not 600 pounds of prehistoric certainty. Law stood like a fence they would not jump. Willow tried the underbrush, miscounted weight, stumbled. Everything narrowed. A tunnel, a target, a throat opening into pink, a hinge closing faster than eyes can blink. time didn't slow, hearts did. Nature doesn't promise fairness, it only promises consequences. The shelf became a stage lit by noon and dread. Impact changed the math. The male bobcat hit Old Scar's skull with a force that came from more than mass. Momentum carried claws into softer seams where scales thin around vision. The gator's jaws slammed shut, not on flesh but on surprise. Water reared, sand sheeted, and the air filled with sounds that belonged in chapters written before language. A bass bellow rolling through rib gauges, the rip and rake of claws meeting armor, the hiss of breath forced through a mouth made for crushing bone. The male's body knew arcs and timing, releasing as the reptile rolled, reclaiming the crown of the head, slashing for the globe of sight. Strategy isn't exclusive to primates. Desperation can teach it in a heartbeat. Onshore, human hands whitened around useless edges. Intervention would shatter everything. Witnessing became the only brave act left to perform.
The gator sought depth, his home field, tails scything the shallows into knives. The male adjusted, cutting angles, guarding the gap where Willow trembled. Predator, protector, prey aligned in a tableau that felt carved into the swamp's bones. The rescue team tasted metal at the back of their throats, that flavor of adrenaline when a choice must be not choosing. The male's ear tore, blood beaded and threaded into fur. He did not retreat. He became a hinge between danger and the life behind him. Old Scar paused, a calculus visible in posture. An easy meal had become a cost. Bad odds don't frighten veterans. Pointless odds do. Slowly, the great body sank, until only armored brows and patient eyes remained. Then even those slid under, leaving ripples that spoke of unfinished grudges and the memory of pain as instruction. Silence after violence can feel sacred. The swamp inhaled, held it, then exhaled dragonflies. Willow leaned into the male, bodies communicating in gravity and breath. His shoulders held fresh grooves where scales had rasped hair and skin, pale lines already drying. She shook, not from cold, but from the electricity that follows a sprint through death's doorway. They moved as a pair that had solved something expensive together. The rescuers unclenched, bodies remembering muscles they had frozen. Relief came edged with urgency. Injury remained. Infection doesn't respect victories. The cats melted into palmetto shade, the male moving half a pace ahead, pausing when she stumbled, waiting without theatrics. Shadows restitched around them. The bank, minutes earlier a battlefield, looked ordinary again, as though nothing had happened. Ordinary is what the wild wears after catastrophe. It keeps miracles from becoming expectations.
Retreat doesn't end the story. It changes its route. Back at the center, screens bloomed with captured movement, frames slowed to reveal swelling, pus sheen, missing claws, angles wrong by degrees that matter. The veterinarian mapped a timeline measured in bacteria and thresholds. A window existed, narrow as reeds, where intervention could mean the difference between a hunter returning to her rounds and a body becoming feeder stock for vultures and fish. The plan flipped from passive patience to an active net. A larger trap was hauled into a clearing that stole breezes, lined with blankets that would not scrape. Venison became an argument the body can't ignore. The gamble was simple and savage. Could they coax one wildlife toward help without breaking the other wildlife's trust, the one that had stood in the doorway and barred a jaw with his own blood? Twilight advanced with the swamp's usual chorus, frogs striking notes like plucked wires, cicadas grinding summer into sound, fireflies writing brief exclamation points. The trap's door yawned, pressure plate tuned to the weight of a cat that had lost a little mass to hunger and infection. The male came first, a phantom assembled from muscle and vigilance, orbiting the metal scent with suspicion older than metal. Willow followed, hunger shouldering aside fear 1 inch at a time. Pause tested the threshold, retreat rehearsed itself in her spine. The male nudged space, not her. the way presence can build a bridge where there is only air. When the plate tipped, the click was soft as a secret, but loud as fate. Fear sprinted inside the cage, bounced, returned to breathing. Outside, the male paced, a metronome of threat held in check by love sharpened into discipline.
Capture is mercy and ugly packaging. The blanket calmed the world to muffled shapes and a tunnel of scent. The cartwheels rumbled, the truck's bed thudded, and night widened to country road. At the center, light gentled, antiseptic kissed the air, and hands became tools that understood reverence. Sedation unspooled her into weightless sleep. The wound revealed its ambition, deeper than assumed, lined with glittering betrayals. Glass chips, sand kernels, black threads of necrotic grit. Saline washed, fragments left like bad memories finally named. Antibiotics entered the bloodstream with quiet efficiency. Fluids chased dehydration from dull organs, and a dressing bound the pad like a promise. In a quiet room, straw whispered under her sides. Outside, a shape haunted the tree line, pacing a ritual route under stars that pretended not to watch. Some separations ache the way broken weather settles in bones. 3 days rebuilt the edge. Sleep became architecture. Nutrition thickened muscles. Fever sweated out. The paw tested weight and flinched less. In waking moments, her eyes sharpened from glassy to gemstone, tracking movement, measuring trust, cataloging freedom routes even in confinement. The humans traded shifts, scenting a room with patience and the relief that work can deliver. In the pasture's margin, the male's silhouette stitched and unstitched from trees, a guardian threaded to a door he could not open. Meat offerings vanished from grass at intervals that proved he was still whole. Day 4, the bandage came away. Flesh pinked where rot had considered building a home. The vet's hand spoke competence. The cat's body listened. Release no longer sounded like hope. It sounded like procedure. The swamp waited with both welcome and rules. Survival always requires remembering both at once.
They returned to the slough at first light, when mist sanded edges and made distance a rumor. The crate door grated. Willow crouched, recalculating, then flowed into green like gravity remembered. The male materialized from ferns without theatrics, a piece fitting back into its own puzzle. Their muzzles touched, a brief static of recognition. Then they vanished together, tails bobbing like small flags announcing nothing. The rescuers stood still after the moment ended, letting the swamp swallow their footprints and the engine tick cool. Release is letting go of control you never really had. In the weeks that followed, cameras reacquainted the team with tracks that paired and separated with the rhythms of hunting and hiding. The sandbar where Old Scar had been repelled stayed quiet. Even reptiles avoid the outline of their own embarrassment. Memory isn't human property, it is a survival tool with teeth. Non-linearity lives in how stories echo. Months later, autumn laid copper needles over the water, and the lenses caught motion arranged in 4s, then 5 when a late riser skittered forward. Kittens, ears too grand for skulls, spots dark as spilled ink, practicing ambush on dead fern as if it might fight back. The male tolerated pounces with a grace that argued experience and pride, rolling to show them a target, swatting with restraint learned the hard way. Such paternal presence isn't standard issue for bobcats, yet the wild keeps a drawer for exceptions. Willow moved with a date that no longer wrote pain into every step, guiding the small bodies away from water margins with gestures that translated into law. Approach curiosity, do not approach hunger. Above the slough, vultures circled for reasons unrelated. Not every omen belongs to your chapter.
Flash back further, before the rescue, before the male's leap, before Scars taught Old Scar what not to try twice. A trail camera trapped a night where Willow missed a rabbit by inches, the stumble at the end turning opportunity into noise. The rabbit's drumbeat faded, hers remained ragged. She fed on leftovers and luck,
a diet that fins even stubborn bodies. Solitude narrowed her routes. She paused more, looked back more, learned the exact give of rotten logs. Tracks told on her to everything that could read. Across weeks, the male's prints overlapped more often, his urine marks braiding alongside hers, not aggressive, not distant. Territory can be a war or a treaty. He chose treaty. The swamp allowed that choice the way it allows storms, without opinion, but with consequences slotted into place like vertebrae. Return to the sandbar. See again the angle of Willow's body before decision, the weight shifting through tendons singing pain. See again the shadow before the leap. The male's body was not reckless. It was calculated ferocity. He aimed for the skull because the skull offered purchase and leverage. He raked the eyes because vision collapses confidence. He retreated at the waterline because changing mediums flips advantage. He guarded the space behind him because the objective was not victory, it was protection. Such choices look like love because they are love translated into physics, a language the swamp respects. Old Scar wasn't beaten, he was convinced. Animals don't cling to pride, they cling to survival. He would glide elsewhere, regather certainty, and wait for a different equation. The bank, meanwhile, added an invisible fence only the participants could see.
People entered the legend because people watched and then told it. The rescue leader filed reports that included coordinates and weather and decisions, stamped with policies that keep compassion from becoming chaos. The vet recorded dosages, the angle of sutures, the char of old infection. A classroom later listened to a story that refused cheap heroes. The gator was not evil, the bobcats were not saints, the humans were not saviors. The swamp arranged the stage. Everyone acted their nature. Yet, within nature, variables exist. Trash tossed once on a humid night, a male who refused indifference, a team that chose patience until patience would betray life. Children leaned forward when they heard the moment of impact, but they remembered the weeks of healing, too. Most horror rests on minutes, most survival rests on maintenance. Another twist hid in plain sight. Proximity to people had taught Old Scar to measure risk differently. The propeller scar told of a chase or a feed gone wrong years back, a calculus interrupted by speed and noise. Since then, he had approached shorelines with an expectation of scraps, not ambush. That expectation bred arrogance the way coasts breed storms. Slowly, then all at once. The clash on the sandbar rewired him. Later sightings placed him in deeper water, cruising patience miles from the shelf that had bitten his pride. One eye filmed over, clouded like a pearl with a story. Injury educates. Education spreads. Turtles basked longer on logs he vacated. Smaller gators floated closer to fishing paths he relinquished. A single decision can ripple through a food web without ever earning a headline.
The rescue center became a hinge between wildness and the fragile net humans stretch against our own mistakes. Metal bowls rang with clean water, freezers hummed with meat labeled in exact ounces. Whiteboards bloomed with names and dates and outcomes that sometimes ended in silence. Willow's case stained nobody with glory. It simply underlined a mission: alleviate the harm humans cause, respect the harm nature requires. The team did not post triumphant photos. They let the story breathe in privacy until the cameras offered proof that privacy had worked. When the kittens arrived, celebration was hushed. Interior, a smile exchanged over a monitor, a note written, 3 confirmed, maybe 4. Success in conservation rarely looks cinematic. It looks like a line that didn't break and a schedule that held. Storm season pressed its thumb on the swamp, folding wind into the canopy until trees sang in a register that unsettled bone. Rain bullied trails into streams, and streams into brown rivers that forgot their banks. The sandbar drowned for a week, then reappeared rearranged, roots naked and mud polished. Willow shifted her den upslope, her choice etched in tracks that detoured around flooded tangles. The male scouted ahead, returning with fur damp to his shoulders, whiskers jeweled. Kittens learned that seasons are teachers with no gentle curriculum. Feeding grew harder, hunting lines stretched further. The family moved like a single organism with 5 beating centers, conserving energy the way firefighters conserve oxygen.
When the waters sighed back into their usual beds, the slough brightened with 100 brief births. Mushrooms sprung overnight, minnows flickering like coins everywhere, insects writing fevered poems. The kittens exploded with practice, turning littered bark into enemies, turning grasshoppers into puzzles. Willow demonstrated patience as a weapon, freezing so thoroughly that air forgot to bend around her. The male paraded rabbit and squirrel carcasses, then withheld, forcing the young to puzzle through killing bites with teeth still learning responsibility. Scars on his shoulder faded into thin stories you must part fur to read. The pressure that had nearly broken the family became a forge. There is no montage music in the wild, only repetition until muscle learns what mind cannot explain. Another nonlinear turn. Picture a future dusk years later, a woman pausing at the tree line, listening for a cough bark she may never hear again. Bobcats live brief, bright lives. Their legends outlast their bodies. She watches a pair step onto the sandbar, one the size of memory, one smaller by a whisker's width. 2 shadows follow, kittens modeled by twilight. The older looks across the water as if reading from a page only he can see, then turns away. No acknowledgement, no epilogue gift. The wild is courteous enough to continue without you. She exhales a breath she wasn't guarding on purpose. Continuity can be the most extravagant miracle.
We wind to the night after release. The male curled his body in a half circle near Willow's sleeping hollow, ears clocking every splash, every owl wing. Pain wakes in waves. He woke with it, then slept and woke again, inventorying aches as assets instead of hindrances. Willow dreamed in running flickers, muscles twitching to the script of a chase that ended with full bellies and unthreatened paws. Far off, an airboat muttered, then dissolved into distance, its wake arriving as a rumor that never reached shore. Stars turned their indifferent faces. Somewhere, Old Scar rested under a blanket of brown water, heartbeat slow as geology, neural nets resetting to a new perimeter. Sleep in the swamp belongs to those who accept that nothing sleeps entirely. Education became a ritual. Willow led the kittens to the water's edge one morning when heat had not yet claimed breath. She stopped well before danger and lowered her body into a crouch that translated into command. The kittens stacked behind her like commas in a sentence that warns without scolding. An alligator's nostrils pinched the surface beyond, bland as berries until you know what they promise. Curiosity vibrated through small bodies. She flicked her tail once, a semaphore. They froze. The male held the flank, eyes fixed on water, position angled to intercept any surprise. Minutes became a lesson that settled into bones. The group pivoted and drifted away, carving a wide curve around the bank. Rules had been written. The swamp had countersigned.
Humans updated their side of the ledger. Trash barrels received lids that locked. Signs grew less scolding and more instructive. School kids visited cleanups and left with hands dirty and eyes brighter. The story of the sandbar traveled without anyone needing to dramatize. It was dramatic already. The male's leap became an emblem for a kind of loyalty the wild recognizes but doesn't name. Willow's limp became an emblem for vulnerability that refuses surrender. Old Scar's retreat became an emblem for the recalibration all predators must perform when the world throws surprise like a spear. The rescue center's quiet rooms remained quiet. A success measured itself in kittens vanishing into adolescence without needing a second intervention. One hidden twist, the tranquilizer that never fired, haunted the team for a month. The dart designed for a 30-pound cat had looked like a key when panic begged for keys. They had held, and by holding, had not caused the reflexive snap that might have closed on Willow's ribs. Restraint isn't cinematic. It seldom earns applause. But restraint saved a life in the exact second where action might have taken it. In reviews, the team logged the not choice as a choice and stored it for future storms. The next report would read the same. Observe until intervention helps. Intervene only against harm we authored. Record the rest with humility. The swamp needs fewer heroes than witnesses.
Old Scar's legend forked. Some swore he grew meaner, others that he mellowed, but the truth rode in the currents he chose. He fed farther from people, avoided shelves that suggested ambush, and held a deeper lane like a king who has learned the cost of street fights. Predators can age into wisdom when luck spares them the final, catastrophic miscalculation. His clouded eye did not prevent him from finding fish or turtles. It merely shaved a margin from chances he would not take anyway. If the sandbar made him myth, it was not for defeat. It was for the visible moment he decided survival outranked hunger. Decisions like that shape worlds. The kittens entered their dangerous bloom, big enough to be bold, not yet seasoned enough to respect everything they should. Siblings sparred until breath rasped, then slept in a pile that exhaled grass scent and milk memory. They learned boundary songs sung in urine and claw marks. They discovered the sweetness of an oak hammock after rain and the treachery of a sun-warmed log that looks like land but slides like muscle. Willow watched and corrected with economy. The male patrolled and offered opportunities that looked like games until they became skills. Every evening, the family braided into a moving silence that made deer twitch and raccoons reconsider. The swamp, ever impartial, graded them daily.
Years' thin details, leaving the nouns. Bobcat, alligator, rescue, sandbar. But for those who were near, the verbs remain. Leaped, raked, sank, waited, healed, guided. The human heart keeps a catalog of moments when the universe looked directly at it and did not blink. The sandbar moment lodged there. It argued that courage is not always a posture. Sometimes it is a geometry, a decision to place your body where harm must pass through it before it reaches what you love. It argued that repair matters as much as resistance, that both can be quiet, meticulous, and unspectacular. It argued that the wild is not a theater for us. It is a nation with its own laws, generous only to those who study them. Return to the first image. Water erupting, sand flying, the impossible made into bruises and breath. Now widen. See the chain stretching forward, kittens streaking through copper needles, a scar fading to memory under fur, a reptile slipping into deeper lanes with a lesson stitched under bone. See the chain backward, shards glinting where thoughtless hands tossed, a limp rewriting routes, patience building a trap that held mercy instead of punishment. The shock everyone felt wasn't a miracle intruding on a lawless wild. It was law behaving at its most elegant. Cause, effect, counter-cause, correction. The swamp did not soften that day. It balanced, and in the balance, life tipped, just enough to continue. That is the kind of ending the wild allows, also the kind anyone paying attention learns to defend.